And I'm going to share my screen. So welcome, folks. Are you seeing my slides? Yes? Awesome. So thank you for coming to the second installment of the Employing Linguistics August webinar series. So I'm working on this book right now. And I'm at that stage where I'm like 80% done with the book. And I don't know how many of you get to this point when you're at like the 80% done stage. Somehow that last 20% is very daunting. And a friend of mine said, you know what, maybe what you could do right at this point is kind of open up the book and start to share and get a little bit of the momentum and enthusiasm going that way. And it's working. So thank you all. You're helping me finish my book right now. So today we're talking about what is chapter 2 in this book, Brighton. It is an acronym that I came up with when I ran a master's program that you'll hear about soon. You'll hear more about it soon. I was asked the question, what can you do with a degree in linguistics, a lot. And I would always say, well, let's reframe that question, right? Let's talk about what you want to do. And then we can start thinking about how someone with those interests might try to find a way to bring more, and like people, they wanted a quicker answer than that. So I came up with an acronym. So when they would say, what can you do with a degree in linguistics? I'd say, well, here's one answer, and it's 7 things. And for me, these are worlds of work. I derived this acronym from, the work that people were doing. And the way that I tell this story in the book is I talk about 10 of my students 10 years out. So they graduated with their master's just about 10 years ago. And that set of 10 students have done all of these worlds of work. So Brighton stands for business, research, innovation. I sometimes change what I means, and I was on a webinar this morning, and it's had me think about the word innovation in a new way. So I will probably change again. G for government, H, healthcare communications, technology, education, and nonprofits. And probably, as you'll hear, the people in this panel too, we can probably talk about any given job often touches on 1, 2, 3, 4 of these. So it's not meant to be, these buckets are not meant to be comprehensive or exclusive. They're just meant to start from a place of breadth and a place of broadening your thinking. And you'll notice Brighton itself is also kind of an exhortation, and it helps remind us, I think, to take an outlook of abundance and an idea that there's lots of things you can do with your training, skills and training, interests in linguistics. And today I'm delighted to be joined by 3 people who have amazing stories to share, to embody just that. So I'll just start with a couple things that I do. I love to think about careers, to career navigation, career exploration, career education. So one of the things I do is write books. Another thing that I'm doing, this will be starting September 4th at 2 p.m. Pacific. I have the slide with the flipped around time zone, because, why not cause time zone confusion when you can? Look at careerlinguist.com, and then it'll be fixed there. I like to bring together, for me, I think the best way to navigate career is to bring people together and have them hear and reflect and listen to one another's stories. So this is 5 weeks of story listening, story finding, and storytelling. If you're at a point in your career where you're trying to maybe take stock, reevaluate, maybe you're transitioning, maybe you're thinking about transitioning careers, or you just want to kind of take stock of where you're at and kind of why you want to be there, this is a great place to come. We always have people who are at various stages, and it's one of the best parts of the process. So that's one thing I do with my interest in story and my interest in career. Another thing I do is I host a community that is called the CL Mighty Network. Now, this is for people, majority of whom are working, right? And this is about like the day-to-day of career. And we sort of come with questions like, I'm managing an employee and we had this difficult conversation. And we all kind of bring an awareness of language and some linguistic framework sometimes and some theoretical understandings that end up often helping us re-envision, reimagine some of the challenges that present as part of the day-to-day of having a job. And yeah, if you're interested, it's free for the first month to try out. We had a great book club discussion earlier this week with Michael Barron, the author of this book here, Subtle Acts of Exclusion. He's an anthropologist, but he said it was thrilling to be among linguists. We talked about taxonomies, among other things. But yes, now, with no further ado, I'm going to stop my screen share so you can just see the four of us. This is your panel today to talk about Brighton. And I'm going to give over to Katie, my co-organizer first, because she's the first one in my carousel.
Hello, my name is Katie Nelson. I completed my PhD in linguistics. My dissertation was specifically on acoustic phonetics, and I did that by working with an indigenous language, the Nez Perce language. And after I finished my degree, I got a non-tenure line job at Illinois State University and taught there for 3 years. One of the things that I did there that ended up shaping some of my future career choices was working with pre-service teachers who were getting TESOL endorsements or something like that, or people becoming TESOL, who wanted to become TESOL instructors. And so I did a lot of language, culture, identity, education, cross-cultural communication courses, foundations of linguistics. So this wide variety of theoretical linguistics and applied linguistics. And so this became something that was particularly interesting to me because I realized how impactful that was down the line. So teaching these teachers impacted their students. And after I finished there, I worked for 1 year with an indigenous tribe of Southern California, and I was their language curriculum developer. And that was particularly cool because I got to essentially do what I did for my dissertation. I got to work with a tribal elder and develop curriculum to help work with their language revitalization efforts. We would go in the mountains and get traditional foods for tribal members for curriculum needs, that we would use in our curriculum to teach about traditional ways of eating and cooking, which we would then incorporate language into that. So there's a lot of anthropological work, linguistic work in that. And then after that, I worked with a education startup where we worked with college prep. And one of the things that I did that was cool while I was there was I got to develop an online English communication course. So there's a variety of things. You can see how I have a degree in linguistics, but I've done a bunch of different things in linguistics. And at this point, I work more independently as a consultant in broadly language, culture, identity, and education. I do some freelancing. I do, there's a variety of things that I do in here. So all of it is pretty much centered around some form of language, culture, identity, and education. But I like to branch out because
Katie,
what I enjoy.
I think you just gave me my new eye.
Oh, what?
And you were talking about impact. I like impact as the I, because cool. You were talking about the satisfying, knowing that when you teach teachers, you're impacting not just that, but I think impact is my new I.
Yeah, one of the things that was what showed me that was when I got course reviews or students, I could see the light bulb go on where they came to understand who they were. Some of the students I had grown up in very insular communities and had not been exposed to different ideas and different experiences. And through the course, they started realizing, wait, these other ways of doing things are really cool and are really interesting. And like the light bulb would go on. And it was really interesting to see that. And, course review showed that too. So it definitely impacted them, not just themselves, but then down the road too. So
that is awesome. All right, thank you. Anthony, you're next in the carousel.
Hi, I'm Anthony Koth. I graduated just last year with my PhD. My focus was on semantics and cognitive linguistics broadly, and I looked at the 2016 election, which was a nightmare. And then after I finished, I started having to figure out, okay, I need this job thing. I kind of knew early on that academia was not going to be where I wanted to be because of various things that happened to me as a student, and kind of seeing and hearing the state of academia broadly. I had a couple friends get into it in different respects, and it just never seemed like my world. So as I was trying to get around finding a job, I was basically throwing spaghetti against the wall. I was looking at government contracting work. I was looking at, I shouldn't say teaching, or yes, teaching specifically. There was one or two jobs at libraries that actually started seeming interesting, where one was at Virginia Tech in their digital humanities library section, where they needed a combination of computer management and technical skills, plus laboratory teaching for things like data mining and text analytics things that I used in my dissertation process. So that would have been kind of fun because I would have been in education, but not necessarily in the kind of scary part of teaching where, publish or perish and the student reviews live by, so that was interesting. I also kind of looked back to where I had been in life and the other jobs I had to see if maybe it was worth returning to a previous career, because grad school can be kind of a mid-break career, if you will. So I started looking at theater work again. Actually, the mandala behind me came from a theater performance that I helped tech way back in the day. So I found a couple jobs around in the theater world. One was in Hawaii, which would have been awesome. They actually called me. I was very surprised at that. But alas, that did not occur. And then I wound up talking to a friend who's at Adobe, who works in like UX, knowledge management, and design. He gave me some keywords and terms, and then from there, I forget how I stumbled on taxonomy as a term. I had not thought about that at all as something that is actively done. And then next thing you know, I started seeing there was a taxonomy position at Facebook, I believe, specifically related to political situations in some sort. So this was last fall. I think I was looking into these jobs, and I think they were starting to gear up for potential issues in the election cycle. Thankfully, I did not get that because someone I work with at Indeed was at Facebook doing something similar, and she said that some of the stuff you have to read through and deal with can be very psychically damaging. So yeah, I'm kind of glad I didn't get that job because I don't know. I think I would have liked it, but the whole political situation as it is might be difficult in this day and age. And that's irrespective of party affiliation right there. I mean, just there's so much acrimony, it seems, on both sides, both ways, that someone else can do that. So I really like working at Indeed because we help people get jobs. That's our tagline. And it's just basically discourse analysis of job ads and resumes and figuring out ways to organize all of these data points into useful packages that the engineers then take our information and the buckets and bins we put the job ads into, and then they can help search algorithm and tuning so that if someone goes to the website and searches for something like project manager, which is even for us a notoriously difficult term, where we've been able to put it in our taxonomies, for example, it can maybe get closer to the industry that a person is trying to get into. And then we've got some other teams using our data in various ways to help match job seekers to employers, also to help with resume tuning, I believe. And there's other ways that our products from taxonomy are helping other departments give value to both the employers and the future employees to help make that connection between the two more likely to happen quicker on both sides. So that's kind of what I do.
So cool. And it makes me realize I'm missing arts in my Brighton. I need an art or theater or some kind of Brightoner.
Well, actually, so yeah, when I was thinking about it, I had a friend from the theater I worked at. He kind of suggested work with theater departments at the college level and bring like a linguistic perspective to script reading. And there, I did have an opportunity or two while I was finishing up at another theater I worked at. They were putting on Macbeth, and I had a quick moment with one of the actors on the side.
You mean the Scottish play, Anthony?
We're not in a theater, so it doesn't have to be the Scottish play.
Okay.
Theater. And it was the key scene where Banquo confronts Macbeth about the murder, and I was talking to the Banquo guy, and I was like, when does Banquo realize that Macbeth has lied to him? He's like, oh, well, I was like, no, it's the minute Macbeth doesn't say no. The minute Macbeth kind of starts prevaricating, well, and we know that from the adjacency pairs that right there, there's a lie coming. And that's when Banquo, as the character, should start really emoting that dispreferred response is going to give a dispreferred response on Banquo's part. So yeah, that could be an interesting A to put in there.
So cool. Awesome. This is going to be a fun discussion. Alex, tell us about your world.
About my world, that is very, very broad right now. I will say my name is Alex Johnston. I'm currently located in a department of linguistics as a non-tenure line faculty member and as director of a master's program in language and communication. And this is the program that Anna Marie was just saying that she directed, and from which she took a lot of data for the books that she's been writing and for the communities of linguists and others that she's been developing. So I should say this is a very unique linguistics program in the sense that it is very rigorous and academically focused on applied sociolinguistics, flexible enough to include other aspects of the field. But there is, in addition, and fundamental to the program, this focus on career. And I owe a lot of that to the way that this program was conceived and then executed by Anna Marie, because she really developed it into a program that will help to position linguists to seek the next step in their career journey, wherever it might take them. And as you've been hearing, it could take them to any number of careers and paths and jobs, and be entirely flexible in what you make of it, what you craft of it. Linguistics training gives you insight onto what Samantha Beaver of MEMRA in Madison, Wisconsin might call the technology of language. We know that language mediates everything that we do, everything. And so that's why I know people on this panel may think too, may agree that everything involves linguistics. You can't separate linguistics from culture, from society, from work, from education. That's how we constitute it. So I'll give you an example from my own life about some work that I've been engaged in, so you can situate me as you will. I started off by saying that I'm located in a department of linguistics. So if I'm speaking to a group of sociolinguists, in an academic setting or in an academic conference, I would likely say that I am an interactional sociolinguist and discourse analyst with research interests in intercultural communication, gender and language in the workplace, institutional gatekeeping encounters, and how language and power are interrelated. And I teach courses like intercultural communication, as well as a professionalization seminar that Anna Marie developed. We'll talk a bit more about that later, I'm sure. So you can see in what I just said, there are some keywords that academics would pick up on that people in the corporate world, where I also worked, would not. In fact, it might serve to alienate them with a lot of words like language and power and linguistics itself. What does that mean? So I've worked for about 10 years as a corporate trainer in professional development in several corporate offices, primarily in the agricultural and biotechnology space. So I get hired by Fortune 100 companies to deliver programs in intercultural communication. So I might say that I'm a communications expert and I can deliver programs that will teach your employees how to communicate effectively without derailers across organizational units. Meh. If I were talking to somebody in government, perhaps with some former colleagues who worked with programs in the State Department, I would probably say that I was an exchange alum, that I had a year abroad on the flagship international educational exchange program called the Fulbright program, where I went to Japan and I developed subject matter expertise in international education and regional area expertise in East Asia and the Pacific. So these are all, as we know as linguists, we always think of who our audience is. We always design, you know, what we say and how we interact with who is there in the room with us and who may be also out there. I don't have much of a sense of who's out there other than your geographical settings that you've been willing to share with us. But that's one of our strengths as a linguist, in having that as part of our skill set, in being able to adjust and to our audience and to frame and reframe our skills and abilities and the way that we can add value to an organization where we want to be. This is one of our skills that allow us to analyze the language of employers and, you know, take that language and use it so that we can develop co-membership. So we can have employers think, oh, wait, they understand what we're doing here. They're using the words that I understand, that I use, that are important in the work that we do. So that's another skill that we have. We have really broad-ranging skills. And I think, you know, none of us are ever in this world of work. We don't sit still, right? Even if we're in the same job for any number of years, we still have to constantly change and constantly innovate. And so that's one thing too, is that as linguists, we develop these skills in reassessing environment, reassessing interactions, and we're able to kind of go with that flow. We're able to name it, to describe it, and to figure out how we can fit, where we can add value, how we can move forward. I've always felt too, just as a last thing to say before I ask if there are any questions or if we want to expand or on any part of this, you know, linguistics is an area where we can have incredible impact, and we should. Linguists are part of the world. We deal in language. And I think that we have the imperative to try and create that impact and create and work for social justice and work for the social good. So we have all these skills, we have all this knowledge, and it's up to us to find ways where we can have impact. So we all do that in different ways and across our work life and our lifespan differently. But you know, that's one of the reasons that I love the work that I do and where I feel that I can fit. And just as a brief aside, if anybody is interested in entrepreneurship, that's how I also got started in linguistics, was as an independent consultant that actually our faculty in the Department of Linguistics at Georgetown, where I got my doctorate, encouraged us. They said, hey, go start a business, you guys. And this was in the 90s, where there wasn't, you know, it was in the 90s, it was a long time ago. And that stuck with me as, you know, this is going to be my role, like to build this and to find out ways where I can work as a linguist to have some impact wherever I go. So I've carried that through. I still have a consulting business. And if I can be an entrepreneur, then anybody can, believe me. And it's something that you can learn and you can grow with. So I think I'll stop here and see if anybody wants to interact. And if there are questions in the chat, please send them, because we want to respond to what you're interested in.
Yeah, please. We have one comment in the chat. We'd love to hear your questions. I know some of the people in this group are interested in many of the things that we've mentioned. So bring them. We want them. One comment for you, Anthony, was this theater friend who teaches all things voice to theater students.
Yep, nice. I don't know anyone in my world that does that other than, acting professors, but I could see how a linguist with phonetics. Actually, I did have a phonetics class in my undergraduate, which was a diction class for theater and mainly musicians, opera singers, but a couple of actors were in there, and I was in the theater program, and I was also, my undergraduate degree was in German, and the professor was the German professor, so kind of why I did it. So I learned IPA in a foreign language class for opera singers, not in a linguistics course. It's out there. Some people use it. And a friend of mine who is a orchestra master at a school also uses IPA sort of as a teaching tool. He doesn't require his students to know it, but he knows enough of the symbols to throw them up on a whiteboard and be like, I mean this A, not that A. And they're like, okay.
When I was at NYU, one of the faculty there, he has his own business, Doug Honoraff. It's a voice. He was teaching phonology, but he has a business to do accent and dialect coaching for actors. The name is right here on the tip of my tongue. But Google Doug.
As you're thinking about that, I was going to add, I'm also a classical singer. And as I did a lot of my training, I would talk to my teachers a lot about phonetics, phonology, diction, just the acoustics, and like, oh, the reason that the vowel shape doesn't matter when you hit that high of a note is because your fundamental frequency is overrode the first formant of the vowel, and all this, like all these little technical things that are super interesting. But like once you get a certain point, it literally doesn't matter what vowel you make, because no one will hear it. But anyway, so there's a lot of interesting applications in that world, yes.
So there is a question for me in the chat, and I know some of you might also be able to illuminate this question about healthcare communication. So when I was directing the MLC, that was the one that was, if somebody said to me they were interested in health, I said, you're gonna have no problems. And it's largely because of faculty members at Georgetown like Heidi Hamilton, who've had research collaborations with medical professionals for decades, and has just built a lot of trust and a lot of understanding, such that oftentimes you will find these healthcare communication firms, they are actively recruiting linguists, and they will say in the job description, like, we want someone who's trained in semantics, phonology, morphology, like we want all of it. And so, well, there's organizations, I don't want to just start listing organizations. I suppose I could say, look at one place to look. I have a 50 organizations that hire linguists list. I have that up on Career Linguist. Every organization that's listed there has a linguist that I know working at it. And some of those firms are up there. But some of the things that people do, and Alex, maybe you have a better sense more recently of what people do. But I know you're often some of these research. It's a lot of research shops that have extensive databases of doctor-patient interactions in some cases. Sometimes it's marketing a drug. There's a lot of things you could be doing, eh?
Yeah, that's true. There are so many organizations that look for linguists to work in healthcare communication. I'm thinking of one in particular where I've just developed a research partnership with them so that they can engage in basic linguistic research. I mean, this is done in STEM all the time, but we now are at the stage where we have a company that's investing in us and in our students to provide an internship and potentially full-time staffing roles in healthcare communication basic research. So what can be done is that in the case of this company, which is Invibe Labs, they collect answers to interviews that are taken over the phone, and they have an advanced set of listening technologies that search the voice for different emotions and to measure the types of emotions that are expressed in voice and intonation as in response to different research questions. In addition to that, there are linguists who are doing discourse analysis on how people answer questions when they're, responding to an anonymized interviewer. So you can apply discourse analysis training to these types of jobs. You can apply your training in phonetics and phonology to this work, and you can have a real impact because you can discover the types of miscommunications that occur between healthcare providers and the people that they treat, or the caregivers who accompany the people whom they treat. So you can have a real effect in shedding light on these miscommunications and potentially play a role in developing strategies and protocols so that healthcare providers raise their awareness about things they might be missing, whether it's because of the linguistic or cultural affinities of the patients, and change how they work so that patients have more of a voice and more agency in how they seek healthcare. So there are a number of ways that you can be involved in healthcare communication, as Anna Marie said.
I remember one student of mine was hired by, and now it's an organization, a lot of their funding came from Big Pharma. And when she was first thinking about working at this organization, my acronym begins with B for business. You have to think about business. We live in a society where I'm not a fan of capitalism, but we are in a society where, you have to bring a business lens to kind of just about everything when you start to think about careers. So she'd kind of taken on this job with this idea like, I don't know, I want to have more social impact with my work. But one of the first jobs that she did, they sent her to do an ethnography in a doctor's waiting room. And she was sitting in there and listening to the conversations that patients would have and the kind of fear mongering that would happen in a doctor's waiting room, where patients would be talking about, like, don't let them give you this medicine and don't talk to them about this thing. And she realized that she could really help doctors to say, like, even if a doctor could just say, you may have heard, and just how much of a difference it could be to be a little bit reassuring around certain topics would make all the difference in a patient's health and well-being.
Yeah, and you know what, Anna Marie, you brought up a term, ethnography, which is a term that can be differently interpreted in different fields, and which can also go by different names in different fields and in different professions. So we know that rich ethnography is a great tool for discovering just those kinds of insights. Like, it's just as important what happens before the gatekeeping interaction of the doctor and the patient talking together in the room, right? What comes before and what comes after is also very important. Getting a sense of all of these chains of interactions is important. We may call that ethnography if we're able to, follow along, take notes, record, and do a long-term study of several months. But when it comes, this is a tool that can be referred to in different ways, like in the field of user experience research and design, right? So ethnography is also used there, but it's done on a very short scale with a very quick turnaround. And it might be called a diary study. It might be called something else. So unless you know that term is referring to what you know as just participant observation or observation and note-taking and recording, you won't be able to find that type of job because you have to look for those sorts of keywords and learn the different words that refer to these different tools. And I think that relates to a question in the chat about the use of the word linguistics and linguist and how we refer to ourselves, right? So in the chat, someone mentioned that non-linguists have very varied and yet particular ideas about what a linguist is and does. Have you had issues with this, creating barriers in communicating with industries employing linguists? Have we? Raise your hands. I mean, yes, this is the difficulty everywhere, is that everybody has a different definition of linguist and linguistics. So we have to find out from our audience, the people that we're talking to, what's their conception and how can we meet that? How can we use words that speak to them? So there are very few times I use the word linguist. And for example, if I were in a government agency and I talked about myself as a linguist, I would be heard as someone who has expertise in a world language other than English, right? So that's a very narrow definition of the word. So government, federal agencies, military, linguist is a person who knows another language than English. If I go to, again, a corporate training office or work with corporate clients, I don't tend to say linguist very often. I tend to say communication and then describe what I mean. So it's never obfuscating the meaning. It's just trying to meet your audience where they are and use words that have meaning to them.
So I do want to hear other folks' stories about how they explain linguistics, but I'm also aware that there are 2 questions for you, Anthony, in the naming Anthony. So one, could you say a bit more about what you do and what other opportunities you think there are for folks who do syntax and semantics? And then also, do you think taxonomy is something that is broadly done?
Well, to that particular question, I just had 3 job offers or recruitment things happen this week. So yes, apparently taxonomy is either up and coming, or once you have your foot in the door with it, people will look out for you. I didn't know prior to getting this job that this was a thing. Other terms that it might come under are like information architecture, knowledge management, knowledge curation. Most of the people in my department, and broadly when I look at these ads, they're generally looking for people with library sciences degrees, because the idea is you're organizing information, right? So you're building a system, a classification system, and then you're figuring out ways to make sure all and only the things that are in this bin are in this bin, bin 2, bin 3, bin 4. And then depending on the complexity, so we have a few different taxonomies that we use at Indeed, with different types of data and with varying degrees of precision and recall to make sure we get enough in each and that it's good data so that the engineers can take it from there. Content management is also another term. So a lot of your marketing firms or your media companies. I actually, when I learned about taxonomy as a thing, I started stringing together some keywords like knowledge management or content management, etc. There was a job at the, I believe, New York Post or New York Times where they were looking for someone full-time to be a content manager. So what taxonomy, at least in the tech side, does is you get your pieces of data and then you append metadata to it. So a tag that tells you, okay, this is specifically a sales job, or this is specifically a sports piece, or this is specifically a political piece. Is it political opinion, political fact, political future planning? What aspect under that political? Is it economics? Is it health policy? So you can see why librarians tend to have that skill set coming in to many of these kind of jobs, or why it kind of came out of that. I do believe there are a lot of positions, not just at big companies. 2 of the companies that reached out to me this week, I think, were much smaller. I'd never heard of one, and one was more of an advertising marketing agency. And what taxonomists do is they get the data from everyone, and then they create a unified vocabulary, right? So if you've done any kind of linguistic analysis, you have your analog data set, and you're having to figure out how to parse it and then code it so that you can then refer back to it and count it or make statements over patterns, right? We're the pattern masters. So this is why we can take data, which is just everything that's being done on the internet or most of these computer companies. And we just have naturally learned, or I think we have a proclivity for it. That's why we become linguists. But then we also learn all the tools to break things down into pieces and figure out, okay, does this type of definition scheme work? No, okay, tweak it a little bit. Okay, this definition scheme seems to be better. And as Alex, I think, commented before the webinar, we have the power as taxonomists and as linguists. Like the taxonomists are the ones kind of driving and defining things. Now, yes, sometimes we like to think we have it right, and actually we're having a few issues where we have our idea of how it should be in taxonomy and Indeed, and sometimes it is coming up against the mental models, we've used that term, the mental models of the job seeker or the employer, where they're seeing our categories and they're like, we don't think we're that. We don't think we're that. Or we just don't even understand what's going on here. So that's where Alex also mentioned ethnography. Another term for that is user experience or user interface. So that's a job where my friend at Adobe does user experience design. We actually have a department who they run focus panels, like brief little diary studies, ethnographies with job seekers and with employers, trying to see how our products are or aren't matching up with expectations so that we can then improve our product. So have I hit everything on those, I think?
Cool. Well, yeah, you're describing what you do day to day. And well, have you described what you do day to day? I'd like to hear a typical day. Is there a typical day?
I have to be a little bit vague on this because I don't want to give away intellectual property. I was warned about that early on. Don't do that. So if you do go into a tech company, be advised you might have to sign something like that, and also a non-compete clause. Those are things that happen. So a typical day is I will get a ticket through our ticketing system, or I'll have it for a couple of weeks, and there will be a problem where in our taxonomy we have rules that are labeling data. So we'll have a batch of jobs and we're saying, okay, it belongs in node X. And then if the rules are too broad and they're catching too high in the taxonomy, we call that bloat, right? But we want to push those down. So the job will be go into these bloat node, figure out a different way, refine the rules so that you can move them down the nodes so that the job is where it's supposed to be in our taxonomy. So some problematic job titles, I think even just normal people in a project manager, that can be in so many different types of industries and fields. So that winds up in a couple places in our taxonomy, simply because you can be a project manager in architecture, you can be a project manager in health services, and we have ways of getting underneath the job titles to parse them out, but sometimes they just tweak the genre of the job ad a little bit, and next thing you know, your rules are broken and you're having to go fix them. So that's one kind of aspect. Another one is where we look at keywords themselves and try and figure out how to isolate them in a different system in a different way to see if maybe we can figure out a way to bring some more automaticity to some of these things. So there's like just a raw data coding, like yes, no, it's this, it's not that. So there's a bit of kind of that monkey push button, I feel like at times. And that's the boring thing to me. And then there's times where I have to research things. Like I've got a few tickets where I work on specific industries and you're trying to parse out the jobs within that industry and make like a crosswalk or a sub-taxonomy, if you will, to kind of get more clarity and specificity to some of these more problematic things. Sometimes those are from outside stakeholders who are wanting to help a particular segment or industry, to where we see numbers that we want to kind of improve in terms of matching. And then there's, of course, Zoom meetings. So that I hope I kind of gave a sense of what's going on.
Way to go meta there at the end there, Anthony. Well, I will say time sure flies when you're having fun. We're already coming to the end of our time.
There was, I want to say there was one question that was in the Q&A, and I just wanted to answer it real quickly because I think it's an important question.
So why don't you answer and then also give your final thoughts to close out the panel?
Yeah, so it was asking, advice on linguists seeking social justice related work for marginalized POC communities. And I think that there's a lot of different ways in which you can do this, and there's ways you can do it in a lot of different sectors. I mean, you can do things that are more specifically related to that, like diversity, equity, and inclusion. So things that there are jobs that focus on that. And so like you could target those kinds of things. Maybe there's a communications job for a company that wants somebody who has that background, or there's, you know, more generically research and social justice, you know, and you can apply your research skills and your background and your linguistics lens to that. In tech, they will eventually, they're working on bringing in more of the diversity, equity, inclusion regarding language variation. So I don't know when that will show up. You see a little more commenting on that in job ads and whatnot. So there are options. I don't know if Anthony and Alex and Anna Marie can maybe add in anything else that they know when they give their final summary. But those are some things, like I've done that through education lens. And like a friend of mine and we developed a lesson plan for her students in the public speaking course that she taught, about how to have students better identify their own inherent biases, as well as the ways in which we use language to judge other people. So we had a lesson plan on that, developed that, presented on it at the National Communications Association, and we're gonna look into doing a little more with that here in the future. So like there are different ways in which you can do that. Like I also we've talked about ethnography. I developed a lesson plan regarding self-ethnographies and using ethnographies in general for students, pre-service teachers, to better understand who they are and what their backgrounds are and how they can use, you know, ethnography as a way to engage with students who have backgrounds that are different from theirs and be supportive in that way. So I think there are a lot of options. There's no one particular way that you should go. I would say, depending on where you are in your career, in your education, you know, start research early. You may find something you absolutely love and want to slightly change your focus, but also I want to point out, I have a degree in acoustic phonetics, like specializing in acoustic phonetics. I mean, my secondary area was definitely sociolinguistics. I did a study on social language variation in Oregon, and looking specifically at phonetics though. But, you know, but the point is, you can, if you are getting a PhD and if you're getting a bachelor's degree, you have a wide range of skills in linguistics that you can apply in various ways. And I think, you know, spend some time while you're watching TV, just searching some of these different terms we've brought up. See what job ads pop up. That's my recommendation. I actually kind of like looking at job ads. They're entertaining to see what people say. So that's something that I do.
Some of them.
What?
You have no idea some of the job ads we come across.
There's some of them I'll start reading. I'm like, no, move on. And some of them, you know, they pull me in. Every now and then there's one that I'm just really interested in. I like, oh, I'll apply for it because it's just so fascinating. So anyway, I want to pass on, but I'm glad you guys were able to come. I hope it was helpful to you, and just be creative. Try different things, you know, do summer jobs. Maybe if you're just in undergrad and you're still figuring out where you want to go, try some summer jobs and internships. And you don't, just because you start in one area, it doesn't mean you have to do that the rest of your life. You can change. It's okay.
That's awesome. All right, Anthony, last final words, last ideas.
So I can kind of tie in the social justice thing. The cool thing about being a taxonomist is, as we said, we make the definitions, we make the codes. We're actually looking at ways to make tags like green jobs or veteran-owned or minority-owned business. Like, these are either things we've come up with in the taxonomy department, or other stakeholders say, hey, this might be a cool way to help address some of these concerns.
Yeah.
So even in the world of employment or the idea of the job hunt, there can be a way to bring that out, particularly at a taxonomic level, because again, we can define the world. How's that for a linguist in semantics? And just also the other question about what other jobs for semanticists. Anything in like policy framing, public government, the Frameworks Institute, I believe, was a job that I saw where they basically help nonprofits and other political action committees try and frame their arguments better to get buy-in from voters. So again, social justice, or even just economic policy or preferred tax incentives, you know, however you want to parse that. But that's a way for semanticists, you know, framing is a big keyword. I think that was out there for a bit. They get a lot of carpentry, but maybe with a minus carpenter. But in terms of raw syntax, can't remember. I didn't really look for syntax jobs, but probably copy editing, proofreading, writing, that kind of thing. I know that's not syntax, but the skill set's there.
Thanks, Anthony. Alex, what are your last words? You've been doing some good work in the chat. Thank you.
As far as referring back to the nonprofit organization questions about where linguists can fit in nonprofits, the answer is everywhere. There's hardly any position within a nonprofit that couldn't use the insight and perspective of a linguist, and where you can, once you're in there, develop influence so that you can craft your future as a linguist within that organization and work on things that are important to you, such as social justice, racial equity. You can get involved with advocacy days. And you can also start as a volunteer before you work your way into a nonprofit organization. That's what I did. Go to their advocacy days so that you can speak directly with members of Congress about issues that are important to you. If you're a constituent, they gotta meet with you. And once you have them, you can tell them what you want in your district. Other places that you can be of use in a nonprofit are, in particular, are fundraising, events, and communications. So it's not so much that they will reach out to you as looking for a linguist, but you as a linguist can do everything that's needed within a nonprofit or almost any workplace, and do it really well because of the way you've been trained. With all of the things that we've been talking about here, with being a pattern master and being somebody who thinks about how language, identity, culture, and everything is intertwined. So you will have your influence once you get in the door someplace. And like other people have said, you're not going to be in one place forever. Wherever you land, you use that place as a place to meet and connect and develop your voice, make it known. And when the time is right, prepare for your next step in your journey. And it will you won't be able to do everything at once or all at the same time. But, I hope that your lives are long so that you can have experiences in all of these different sectors and feel like you made an impact and that you left the world, your community, and our world for the better because of how you used your linguistic skills and training. So I would just like to invite anybody also to connect with me, and either through the website that I just posted about the Georgetown Masters in Language and Communication, look for me directly. I would be happy to talk with anybody on this webinar, personally, and about more things that linguists can do. Look for me on LinkedIn, and linguists are an amazing community. I just met half the panel here, Anthony and Katie, and I already feel like, oh yeah, these are my people. Like, people who study linguistics are very collegial and supportive. So never hold back from reaching out to anybody. The worst that can happen is somebody misses your email, your LinkedIn message. Just keep trying, try again, and don't give up.
I second that.
Love it. Well, I couldn't have asked for a better conversation, a better group of questions. Thank you for our participants and our panelists. And you've also done a beautiful job of previewing next week. Next week, we're talking about a linguist's superpowers. I wrote down pattern masters, impact makers. We have the power. I think, I really appreciate the generosity, and thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom and your expertise. And I would encourage everyone on this webinar to reach out These people are amazing resources and generous humans. So thank you all. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much. This is really fun.